The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I am joined this week by two excellent tenants.
Nate Heininger.
And on the second floor, Shane Kelly. And we are talking this week about Luck Be A Landlord, a roguelike deck builder. Doesn't really feel like it. Like, that's the thing about. We'll get into that. This game is a roguelike deck builder, but doesn't really feel like one to me in some pretty interesting ways. So we're going to be talking about it today.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're covering this game. I had a really good time with it, but I do think it's interesting that it calls itself a roguelike, right? It's like the first word in the definition of it, like in the blurb underneath its spot in the Steam shop, and it's like it's a pretty loose translation of what a roguelike is, in that I guess like you are starting over all of the time, but it has almost no other relationship with what you think of for roguelike. But deck builder, I think, is pretty interesting.
I'm going to read the Steam description because I think it's both interesting and also useful. Luck Be A Landlord is a roguelike deck builder about using a slot machine to earn rent money and defeat capitalism. This game does not contain any real-world currency gambling or microtransactions, which I think they put in just to head off the first concern that anyone is going to have when they pull up a game on Steam and the main graphic is a slot machine. So it's a weird one. It's a slot machine mechanic game, kind of, but yeah, okay. Nate,
in a way,
explain this.
The mechanics of the game are pretty simple.
Before we get into things, Raygan almost forgot to do his famous patented enforced.
Oh, are you going to ask us a question again? Okay,
mandatory banter. This week. The related mandatory banter before we get into discussing Luck Be A Landlord. I wanted to ask, this isn't so much of a gaming related question, more just a life question. What is your worst experience that you've had renting or with a landlord?
I've got one. So this isn't renting like a place to stay, but it was was renting a studio for our band to practice. And it was cool. It was this like old warehouse that had been converted into a just a building full of practice spaces. Bands and artists and whatnot would rent out the spaces, and it was pretty cool. Until one day when it rained a ton, and turns out our studio room, which was in the basement, was not fully watertight, and it poured. We weren't there. We don't know how much water actually like went through our room, but enough that it basically soaked like the bottom layer of all of our instruments, everything. Fortunately, nothing was too badly damaged, but basically like all of our cases, like my drum bags, everything were just soaked, and some of it was ruined. And tell you what, they did not give a shit. So that's where the bad, landlord came in, because would have expected some sort of reimbursement. Pretty shitty to rent to bands and places that use people that use a lot of electronics into a room that is apparently able to be full of water. And we did not keep our studio there for very much longer after that. It was very frustrating.
I had a kind of a similar thing with like a leaky roof. That's sort of spoiling the story, but we were living in this really garbagey like half of a house that had been split in half and rented to two people in in the Bay Area in California, and we just couldn't afford much of a place. And we were there with our little dog, and after we moved in, we kept thinking that he was peeing in the kitchen. And we were like taking it when we find a puddle in the kitchen. We'd take the poor dog in there. We'd shove his nose in it because we just have a recurring problem. It's just like constantly getting water in the kitchen. And after a while, we realized that he wasn't peeing in the kitchen. It was a leaky roof.
No.
It was dripping yellow water from the roof. We finally caught it happening, and I felt so bad.
This was poor Dracula?
Yes, it was. It was poor Dracula.
Poor Drac.
Rest in peace, King.
R.I.P. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was all right, but he must have been so confused why we were so mad at him about this water accumulating in the kitchen that had nothing to do with him. Poor guy.
So did you shove your head into a toilet afterwards to try?
Yes. Yeah, no, he did it to me. It was his revenge.
I've had such tame experiences. I have been blessed with a lot of really good places to live in my life, and I've had some sweetheart deals from people, in fact. But I guess the only bad experience I've really had renting was the time it was the middle of the night and a car slammed into my apartment.
That's pretty bad.
Great.
That's not.
I can't blame the landlord for that one. We were right there by Bissonnette, and a drunk guy, I guess, just like slammed into the wall.
Man,
sucks. It was fine. They had it fixed up pretty quick. That's the best part of landlords, is you can call them when something in the house breaks. And now that I have no landlord, I must be the one who is summoned. Yes. And I live in fear that another driver will come out of nowhere and hit my domicile.
Now you are your own landlord.
Indeed.
This is the tragedy of home ownership. Yeah, me too, man.
Yeah. Well, good. We can all hate each other because we are all landlords of our own land.
I hate you.
It's good to have land, and this game certainly has an opinion on landlords, which is which is one of my favorite parts about this game. It has a sense of humor about itself that
it does.
I think is pretty satisfying.
Yeah, can I say, when I first heard the title of this game, I thought it was going to be a landlord simulator where you have to be a landlord. Just, I don't know why, based on something about the way that it looked. I was like, I don't want to be a landlord. It was not appealing. But when I found out more about what the game is actually about, it's a weird title, Luck Be A Landlord. I see how
compared to what you're actually doing in the game, which is like, I want to collect cats, or I want to get dwarves to drink wine.
I'm trying to take down my landlord. Yeah, I think it's the pun was too
the landlord
good.
Theming.
It's a great title
weird because what's really strange about this game is, like, you could take the landlord and anti-capital, the anti-landlord, anti-capitalist theming out of this, and the gameplay would be 100% left alone. Like it's really weird to me that it's like, okay, you've got this wild, crazily extendable collection of items that go into a slot machine that you're pulling and getting weird interactions between the.
We haven't even really explained these mechanics yet, guys. Can I do that?
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that, like, the whole slot machine mechanic, there's nothing that reads landlord about that. It's like you're using a slot machine to make rent money, and that is how the game is tying in this landlord idea. The landlord thing doesn't really feel apart from the fact that you have this cost, like this cost that keeps going up. It doesn't really feel like a landlord game. It feels like a slot machine game with like very opinionated landlord theme.
I have some thoughts on that. I think ultimately the game's design isn't like super tied to the concept that it implies with the name and some of the descriptions. It does have a lot of text that shows up for you that tries to that is more integrated with that idea and what I guess you'd consider the message of the game. But I actually really like how flippant the game is with its with its premise, but ultimately the game is still manages to feel extremely personal because of all of the content in it being so personal to the creator of the game. And this guy is sort of the example that I would give of like what I love people doing on itch.io, right? Making these little personal games that really are cool, fun, little, often free or little tiny experiences here. The whole theme of the landlord thing, like, it's great, and I loved those moments where it really surfaced in the game, but it's surprisingly a small part of it. That said, it's such an engaging little slot machine. Slot machines work on my brain.
I think it's the landlord theming and the jokes are what actually took it into a, like, from a, oh, this is a fun little like toy, into, I thought, an actual like interesting game, because the more you play it too and the deeper you get, the more challenging it gets, and the more the landlord actually becomes kind of a part of it. But it starts out very, very light.
I think one thing to think about with it is that, like, if it didn't have this very explicitly anti-capitalist, anti-landlord kind of theming, maybe the slot machininess of it would feel more like sketchy. You know what I mean? Like slot machines are inherently kind of exploitative. And if this was a game about celebrating the feel of pulling a slot machine, even if it's not a real money gambling game, it might have not felt like, it might have felt different to me. You know what I mean?
I have one big thing to say about the feeling of pulling a slot machine. This game did not assign the button is Y to pull the slot machine, not one of the triggers, so you feel like you're pulling the one-armed bandit. Come on.
That is true. They really ought to have done it with a trigger.
I would argue the entire act of it being a slot machine is also just part of its branding. Because true. This game, it doesn't really act like a slot machine, and you're not rewarded in the same way that a slot machine rewards you either. It is an entirely separate like setup. I think it's a sort of deck building game that then had a slot machine wrapper put on it, and then had the landlord element put on top of that too, to bring it all together.
It's sort of like just trying to say, like, hey, capitalism is a rigged casino kind of thing. You're right. It could have gotten it could have gotten by even without the slot machine theming if it wanted to.
It's not really a slot machine in the way that, like, let's set up the game.
Yes, and then we can, somebody talk about the mechanics.
Can I talk about the basics? Yes. So. When you start the game, you're pulling a slot machine, and that slot machine has 5 wheels on it. And I think each wheel shows 5 things. So you've got a grid, 4 things.
It's 5 by 4. So
5 by 4.
20 total.
So it's mostly going to be empty, and you get 5 items. And when you pull the slot machine, those items are going to give you a coin each, right? And every time you pull the slot machine, you also get to pick another item to add to your wheels, and they're just kind of all going to be thrown out there randomly. And if you're going to keep up with the ever increasing rent, then you need to increase the value that you're getting every time you pull that slot machine. And you do that by combining different symbols, or by just getting symbols that give you more value each time you pull the slot machine. That's about it.
Yeah, so there's, if you think of it, so 5 by 4, there's 20 spaces. And where it doesn't really work like a slot machine is that as long as you're under 20 total symbols, like Shane said, you start with like 5 or 6. Every time you pull the handle, all of them show. Yep. They're all there. It's not like you're getting a random assortment. You're getting all of them. And then once you exceed 20 symbols, at that point, you're going to start getting a random pull of the 20.
That kind of threw me at first, because I'm used to the idea of slot machine symbols being on physical wheels. That's
Right.
just what I imagine. I've actually had very few interactions with actual physical slot machines. I don't know about you guys,
Yeah.
but
Well, I worked in a casino for a year and a half, so
that's right.
unfortunately, I am very
Yeah,
familiar
but you were a
with.
deal. You were dealing cards, man. Well,
Yeah, but you know what is forever baked into my mind is the like constant bing-a-ling, ding, 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 because the table games casino is 90% slot machines. So anything you're doing in a casino, you are surrounded by slot machines, even if you have nothing to do with the slot machines. So I have been around a lot of slot machines in my life, but yeah, so they don't actually work like that. You're not assigning a symbol to a specific part of the wheel. It could show up anywhere. There's 5 across. One spin, it might be in the center left. You spin again, that exact same symbol may be in top right. So as Shane said, they start out with like really mundane, not a lot of value. There's like a cat face, like a little flower. Every time it shows up, you get 1 coin, and you'll have a certain set of spins before the rent is due. So the game starts, and it's something like you have 6 spins to accrue 50 coins. And usually you're going to get that just, you're going to get it every time because there's 5 or 6 symbols and you get 5 or 6 coins every spin and you get 6 spins. So you're going to get that. But then after that, it's 50 coins in 6 spins. And the only thing that has fundamentally changed is the selections you've made. Every time you're done with a spin, you have a chance to add 1 of 3 items or 1 of 3 symbols. And those symbols have a rarity, quality to them. There's common, uncommon, rare, and very rare, and they all have their own benefits. And where the game gets really interesting and complicated is that pretty much every symbol has an interaction with upwards of like from 1 to 25-ish different symbols. So I talked about the one of the starting ones is a flower. There is a symbol that is a raindrop. That raindrop on its own, if it just shows up with nothing around it, it gives you 1 coin. But if it's adjacent, and adjacent means completely touching it, touching another symbol, either left, right, up, down, or diagonally, that rain cloud or that rain symbol gives you a bonus if it's touching the flower, and the flower gives you a bonus. So all of a sudden, where you would have gotten 2 coins, you're now getting 4 if they happen to show up next to each other on that spin. And there's an increasingly complex series of symbol combinations, because by the end of the game, you're paying rent. The final rent that's due is 777 coins. And it's not a lot more of spins. I think like the last round, you get 11 or 12 spins before the rent is due, and you have to pay, almost 800 coins. So the whole game is finding these synergies and hoping you get the luck of the draw, which is where it's exactly like a deck builder. You're trying to make the right choice, make the right compounding choice, so that when you spin, your little combos are all triggering off of each other. And because 20 symbols show at a time, think of it as a deck builder, but you're playing 20 cards all at the exact same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's
really weird about it.
And
that's such a good explanation of the fun of this game. Because I was reading the description of what this game actually was, and as soon as I realized, like, oh, it's like a slot machine with like customizable symbols, or like draftable symbols, I thought, well, okay, this seems like it'll be fun. But I end up sinking hours and hours into this game, and it's exactly that feeling of like dumping your hand of cards every time you pull that lever.
And that is where I think it has that slot machine quality, because like I do think he could have done this. It could have been a tile flipping game. They could have been cards,
dice. Could have been dumping things out of a bag.
Yeah, it could have been a bunch of different ways. But I do think that experience of all the little things spinning, and then what happens is all your symbols show, and they shake and make a little noise every time a combo hits, and then it goes like bing, 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 and all your money adds up in the corner. I do think that has a similar like dopamine rush to a slot machine, because you have no idea how it's going to end, and then they all fly out on the screen, and it's just bing, 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 bing. Especially later in the game when you're getting hundreds of coins on a single spin, it's pretty addicting.
Yeah, and it is like I haven't worked out the math, but like by the end, if you are needing to hit like 700 something coins on a small number of spins, like that means like by the end of a run, you basically have to have like at least some kind of synergy on practically everything on your board. But it's possible because you have this enormous pool of symbols to be pulling from. Like you can talk, Nate, about like, what your strategy was about like when to take a symbol, when to leave a symbol, but like you're constantly being offered the ability to take new symbols. You can re-roll the symbols that you're offered a limited number of times in order to like try to get something that's going to synergize well with what you have. There's no, as far as I know, upper limit to the number of symbols you can put in your bag, although you probably don't want to go above a certain amount. Otherwise, you're just going to have a mess. But it gives you a lot of opportunity to build these synergies.
I haven't actually added it all up, but by the time the game is done, and you win after you pay 777 coins, and the landlord, you chase them away and they go to the next level, and it makes it more difficult, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But ultimately you I think you have somewhere around like 75 spins. So roughly 75 times you can add another symbol. So there's a lot of opportunity to add symbols. But that's not where the synergy ends. The synergy that really allows you to get to that, to those really high numbers, is there's an item system as well, which they're very much.
It's all about combos. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, this is becoming more and more popular in these types of games. It's a lot like Slay the Spire's relic system, where these items are generally hyper specific to a combo. It'll be like the combo I used before, the rain cloud and the flower. It'll be like a sun item, and it's every time your rain and your flower are next to each other, you now get a multiple 2x the amount of coins that you would have gotten. So if you have that item and that combo hits, you now are getting 8 coins or even more if you have some other combos that pair together. So everything like accentuates each other. And what you're really trying to do, at least what I aim to do, is the sort of classic deck building strategy, which is you pick out a couple synergies and you just go hard at maximizing those. So every spin, because 20 symbols are going to show, you try to make it where just exactly those symbols are, or exactly those combos are hitting every single time. But by the time the game's done, you might have 15 different items and 40 different symbols, and it's just an insane, bing, 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 as everything hits off of each other. And it's pretty satisfying.
It's kind of like it's kind of like building a combo deck in Magic. Raygan's going to ring the bell at me. I every time I want to say, but I do think this game is genuinely inspired by Magic in that way. Like there's an explicit reference to a Magic card called Dark Depths in one of the emails that you get from the what is it though? Like I forget how those messages are termed. At a certain number of spins, you get an email from some organization that's giving you rent assistance.
Yeah, it's like a mutual assistance.
Fund
or something like that.
And they're like, so you get an email from the landlord that's saying rent is due. Then you get an email from like a counter group that's trying to bring down capitalism, and they want to help you pay your rent.
Hello, comrade. Your local mutual aid network has heard of your rent situation. to help with your trials, we are giving you 2 reroll tokens and 2 delete tokens to help you defeat your landlord. Stay strong, Commie McConrad at bouncy.mail, which somebody shoot an email to commie_McComrade. But it's in these messages that they also have a postscript from the developer himself, and they'll tell you things like the one where the kind of eldritch beast looking one, I forget what this token is called, says was designed after a trading card. Can you figure out which one? Hint, it was printed in 2016. I believe that is the Merit Lage, which is a token 2020 flying indestructible creature from Magic the Gathering. That's created by a land called Dark Depths.
Anyway, there's a direct Magic reference in this game, so we had to give Shane his moment.
But that's what I was talking about at the start. Like I said, how I liked how kind of jokey but also personal this is. There are little references to the guy's other games. My favorite thing in this game is the 3 items that are those like synergistic items that are the developer's 3 real life pets. And one of them is a cat named Pizza, which I adore.
Yeah,
and a couple of rabbits. Anyone who keeps rabbits as a pet is good people, in my opinion.
I like how the game too. It starts out, you get, the rent is due, and it's all like you probably after a little. It shouldn't take you too terribly long to win your first game, but of course your mileage may vary depending on your experience with these sorts of games. But that's just really a beginning, because after you pay your full run of rent for the first time, the landlord runs to the second floor, and now you start all over. But the rent is going to be slightly higher. And if you beat them again, he goes to another floor, and the rent is going to slowly increase. And now suddenly the game is going to start with like blocker symbols, whereas before all the symbols that you had were good, just maybe not synergistic. Now they're implementing symbols that are just bad, and you have to have them in your hand. And they will go away after a lot of spins, but there's nothing else you can do about them. And it just slowly increases the difficulty. It reminded me a lot of a game I've already mentioned, but the ascension process in Slay the Spire, where like the difference between one level and the one right before it is not going to be very much. But once you've ascended 5 or 6 levels, it's a pretty different game. It's considerably more challenging. I don't think you guys made it this far, but there is actually a story arc kind of with the landlord.
Okay, yes, please illuminate us, because I did not. I know Shane got a lot farther with this than I did. I only
got to floor 2.
I did not do well with this one.
This game's actually pretty hard.
I made it to floor 10, and it gets there. There's a whole other element with the items too, where you start getting essences, and the items are super powered. So this game is actually far more like dense than it even seems right out of the gates, which I appreciated. And you get to the point where you're actually directly fighting the landlord, and he has HP, and every time you spin, you're trying to bring down the HP. It's pretty funny.
That's awesome.
And you will when you win, you execute the landlord. And I don't know, did you guys look at on the main menu? There's a stats page.
No, I haven't gone in there.
The stats page is really funny because it starts tracking just really silly things. There's a lot of really funny combos in this game. So like there's a symbol that is beer, and there's a symbol that is wine, and then there's a symbol that's a dwarf. And anytime the dwarf lands adjacent to beer or wine, it destroys the beer or wine symbol, and you get like a really big bonus. And then in the stats page, it will tell you how many gallons of beer and wine you have drank while playing this game. And once you start on the point where every game you play, you're trying to kill the landlord, there's a stat that just says landlords executed. And on that, we were talking about the anti-capitalist element of it too. There's a symbol it's the billionaire.
Yep, that one I have seen.
Yeah, there's a ton of like characters. There's billionaire, there's the gambler, there's miner, there's a bunch of different stuff. But there's an item called the guillotine. And what the guillotine does is it instantly kills the billionaire every time it shows up, and you get a huge coin bonus. It's actually a really good combo, and I'd recommend going for it if you get it. So you get the guillotine as an item, and then every time you get the option to add the billionaire, you add it, and it will kill it the first time it shows up, and you get a big coin bonus. And then in your stat sheet, there's also like billionaires guillotined, and it tracks how many of those you've done.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it here. Nate endorses beheading the wealthy.
At least billionaires. I think I legitimately do. Billionaires, yes.
Yes, I think maybe I can agree with you. No good billionaires.
All of the little guys that you could add to the wheel that break something, like your dwarf, or the guillotine, or I think my favorite was the toddler. Anybody who's out there, or the miner, of course, breaking the geodes. Any of the symbols that break stuff seemed like they were pretty good strategy that you could really lean into.
Yeah, because what happens is when it breaks it, you usually get a huge bonus. And then it also just takes it off the board. So you're keeping your board relatively cleared. You can just keep adding, items to be broken, and that combo should hit more regularly because it's clearing it. So like the toddler, every time a candy symbol, or it's like a bubble symbol or something like that, shows up next to it, it destroys it, and you get like 15 gold. And so that's what you're looking for, right? Are those combos that are repeatable and give you a good amount of coins.
The way all the symbols interacted would produce some really funny moments for me too. Like there's a chicken, and the chicken is there's a chicken and a chick and an egg. And if you have an egg, it'll eventually hatch into a chick and turn into a chicken and then lay eggs, right? And then there is another symbol that's the farmer. I really love the farmer. It just like increases the value of a lot of various barnyard items, right? So I was going all in on the farmer strategy. So of course I pick up the chickens, but then eventually the chickens multiply themselves so fast that all you have is farmers and chickens.
Yeah,
and you kind of get swamped with it. None of your other good symbols come up.
Yeah, every chicken has a 10% chance to lay an egg, and then that egg will likely eventually become another chicken. And so, you just end up with, by the end of the game, especially if you picked a bunch of eggs or chickens at the beginning of the game, you end up with a ton of them. But like you said, if you get the farmer, and then there's items that like boost those. I had a game that I won on just going on a purely bird focused strategy.
There was like a bird house that makes every bird worth more. See that it's the combos that you really have to go for in this game, and if you don't have multiple overlapping ones, then you won't get all that way.
Ultimately, I think, like, if we are talking strategy a little bit, I think what worked for me is trying to pick 2 to 4 like combo sets that I could focus on, and then skipping everything else. If it didn't match my combo, unless it was like an incredibly valuable symbol that was like, it'll say very rare on it, I would just skip. And I found myself skipping far more than taking symbols, because
that was the advice that really started making the game work a little better for me. Because when I was first going through it, like with most roguelikes, I think I usually default to taking stuff, maybe like 60-40 at least, and usually more, because at least early in the game, you're usually like looking for resources that you can use. You don't have access to much. You need more, right? And with this game, with so many slots on each board, it just seemed like, well, why wouldn't I take additional items, right? Like, just fill it up, man. And then, but there's not really much facility for replacing items. You have to destroy them in order to sort of make more room. And very soon I was being overwhelmed with useless stuff that was only giving me 1 coin a spin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So early good advice that Nate gave me was, don't do that, and err on the side of not taking new symbols.
It's going to offer you a lot of stuff that like gives you 1 coin anytime it shows up and doesn't do anything, and there's just no point in taking that, even right from the start in most cases.
Most symbols are common, and most of them are very weak by themselves. They're only going to be worth it if you have one of the combo pieces.
This is something I really liked about the drafting element of it. You see 3 items, you choose one, or you can re-roll if you have a token, or you can just say skip, right? But each one of those things, it's presented very clearly. You see what the item is. Crucially, you see if it's rare, common, uncommon, whatever. So you can really take that into account and consider if it's something's common, you're probably going to see it again. If it's rare, you're probably not going to see it again. And drafting your selection of symbols that way, it's really, really satisfying. It scratches the same itch as drafting Magic the Gathering, a Wizards of the Coast product, subsidiary of Hasbro Incorporated.
That's why I think like the description of this as a deck builder is very apt.
Yeah.
It's not cards, but like we said, it very well could have been. But much of the same strategy applies. And generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, in deck builders, you want a tighter, like highly effective deck rather than a bloated thing where you're never pulling your high value cards, right? So that's where like one of my favorite combos, it was doing basically like mining, focusing on mining, because what it does is you have a miner, and anytime it's next to an ore, it breaks the ore, and that miner gets 20 gold. And the reason I like it is that the ore is a common item. So it's showing up all the time. So you constantly have this opportunity to add the ore. So it'd break, and then you'd get the money. And then the ore also has a chance to reveal like a high value gem. And so you get this sort of system going where you're taking the ore whenever you get it, it's breaking, and then hopefully you're getting even something more valuable from it. And so, it's like, depending on your comfort and your experience with deck builders will really guide, I think, your sort of how quickly you understand how this game works and how to maximize your strategy, because it's very, very identical. Instead of playing 2 or 3 cards, though, you're playing 20 at a time. So it's kind of max deck builder. But I said it at the beginning, the description where it says it's a roguelike is like, I don't get that as much, because it's like every game is a roguelike. If you think like, is Tetris a roguelike? I don't know. I know the definition of roguelike is super vague, and I try not to get too caught up in like
a lot of people boil it down to you start over.
Yeah, and I guess so, but like I think the modern definition of roguelike is there's something that you carry over, and like you're improving yourself every run, and that's not how this game works at all. It is truly starting over, and it's just slightly more difficult if you beat the last one.
No progression system is the kind of pseudo definition of roguelike that this is hewing to.
Yeah, but I mean, even like, again, Slay the Spire, you're unlocking cards as you play. So like you're getting new access to stuff, even though the game is there's none of that. Just when you die, it's completely starting over. But I'm not trying to be nitpicky. It's fine. I think it's like a little misleading if you see roguelike deck builder, like kind of,
it gets the point across. But I do think we all 3 went into this game with some kind of misapprehension about what ultimately the experience was going to be. And I think that's a little telling.
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, I really, really enjoyed it. Another thing I really like, I don't care about achievements, but I like it when games use them for opportunity to either make jokes or highlight absurd situations. And that's what this game has chosen to use achievements for. And that one popped for me that I like could not believe that they had like pre-expected would even happen and then give you an achievement for it. So there's a bird symbol. It's called the magpie. And every time it shows up, it takes away 1 coin from you. But every 5 spins, you get 9 coins. So it's a net +4. So it's a valuable symbol, especially if you compare it with other things. But I had a spin where my total amount that I needed was 100 gold. And my spin landed with the magpie on it. It took away 1 gold. And my total amount that I got from that was 99. So I missed the rent by 1 gold, ostensibly because my magpie showed up on that spin, and there was an achievement for missing rent by 1 gold when the magpie is on your board, and that cracked me up. There's a ton of good, like, the achievements reward absurd synergies or absurd situations that come from this game. And I appreciate that, because it also tells me they probably did a ton of testing over and over and over just to see what insane things might come up.
So I've been interested to see that this is a game that, like, it has the feel of like one of these like weird little tiny things on itch.io, which I believe is where it began. And it was then sold in early access on Steam for a while. And the version that we all played, it exited early access in early January of this year. And so it still has the sort of feeling and to be honest, kind of look of like, like a jam game or like a weird little itch, indie thing. Right. And as far as I can tell, it's this dev's first Steam release. He's had a handful of other things that he's released on his itch.io page. But it does seem like this game has really sort of found an audience. The Steam page seems busy, lots of reviews, lots of discussion. It's selling for, they upped the price when it exited early access, and it is now $9.99, the princely sum of $9.99. It has what appears to be a modding community. It supports Steam Workshop, and you can download mods for this game that I haven't gone through and looked at what they do, but my guess would be they're, adding additional items or what have you to the game, which I think would be a fun way to extend the enjoyment of this once you've maxed it out, like Nate seems to eminently be about to do.
I really like that there's one that turns all the characters into Kirby. That's fantastic.
There's 20 floors, so I'm only halfway in, but it's gotten incredibly complicated at floor 10. So there's a mod option right on the main page, and it's been nice to see how well this game has been received. And you said it has the appearance of a game jam game, and I do agree with you. It's very simple artwork, but I will say that for a game like this, where it is just flinging 20 symbols all at one time right in front of you, what you're prioritizing there is readability. And I think this game is incredibly readable. Once you've gotten into it, you can absorb what has happened on the board very quickly, because all of the symbols I believe are incredibly distinct and pretty clear what it is that they're doing. It's a little unclear sometimes with some of the people. They kind like, some of them look a little bit similar, but overall, like, I think they prioritized clarity over, some sort of like artistic quality. And I think that was the right choice.
I was also going to mention to people, first of all, this game has a demo on Steam. If you're not sure if this thing is for you, maybe you look at the graphics and you think, I don't know if I'm going to be into this, or maybe you're not sure if you need another roguelike deck builder in your life. You can download the demo on Steam for free, obviously. And this thing is on Windows, Mac, and Steam OS, and runs great on a Steam Deck if you happen to be playing on one of those. I'd also say if you happen to be, if you've purchased a bunch of bundles on itch.io in the past, check your library there. Be A Landlord was included in at least one. I haven't bought like every bundle that's been on itch, but I bought some of the bigger ones, and there was an indie bundle for Palestinian aid last year, and this game was included in that. So I ended up, it turned out I already owned this through that bundle. So if you've bought some itch bundles in the past, especially if you remember buying the bundle for Palestinian aid, go check your itch library. It may already be in there.
I'm just now scrolling through the list of mods for the first time, and I am just I'm so confused. Why are there over 200 mods for this game? Why is it so hot?
I mean, it must just be really easy to mod, right? Like, what would the mods be? You know, there's a little like icon and some kind of little rule about what it does.
Yeah. You know, this would be a great first game to mod. You know, there's a mod that just takes all the capsule items and makes them look like Among Us. There's much more complicated ones that add whole new mechanics as well, but a lot of these are just art swaps. That's cool.
I'm not surprised that it's got a big following, though. I mean, this game really clicked for me, and I really have been having a lot of fun playing it. You know, I think we do a lot of you know, the more narrative based games and the more like we cover a lot of games that tackle interesting and complicated subjects, and I think, you know, generally I prefer that as a gaming experience, and it's one of my favorite things about this show. But sometimes I just want to sit down and play like a pure
pull that lever.
Yeah, well, it's more like just it's
purely sevens.
It's purely mechanics. You know, it's purely like, I love deck building, drafting, as Shane was. It's like my favorite game mechanic, and this game takes that and boils it down to an incredibly simple, but also like flopping 20 symbols at the same time. It's there's no other game that matches that degree of like dopamine when it comes to deck building, and I really enjoy it. And I'm always looking for good. We did that multitasking episode not that long ago.
This would be a good game for multitasking. I mean, I definitely played this on my Steam Deck while doing other things.
Totally.
It was perfect for that.
Because you can spin, you can put it down, spin, put it like there's no need for like intense focus.
Frankly, I'd be really surprised if this doesn't make its way to mobile. This would be a great mobile game. It plays great on the Steam Deck, and I think even if you're, you know, going to sit at a computer and play it, this is going to be a great thing to have like on a window in the background, hide it when your boss walks up behind you kind of vibe. But like, this would also be a really good mobile game if he ports it.
Yeah, I think it'd be tricky, I think, maybe to fit all the symbols in a readable way on like a phone, but it would be perfect for iPad or any sort of tablet where you could really get all the symbols.
I think the main concern would be if you try to sell this game on a phone, most people looking at it in the App Store would assume that it was a low rent, real money slot machine that's trying to get you to buy.
I was going to say
coins.
This might be a little bit too close to home as a mobile game.
Yeah. If you want to live in the rent-seeking capitalist app store, like,
yeah.
And if I can't have my 200 plus mods that do nothing but add shadows to the icons or add a coffee machine, then I don't want it.
Why don't all the symbols have titties?
I need to find if there's a mod that switches the Y button with the trigger, so I can get that pulling the lever feel.
You need to build yourself a custom lever controller for this game, Shane. Obviously, come on.
This game would be kind of hilarious built into an actual slot machine. I gotta say.
That would be pretty cool as like an arcade version of this. Where you put in your coins. That'd be pretty wild.
I'd play the shit out of this at Dave and Buster's.
Oh man, if this was a coin redemption game, oh no.
Yeah, give me tickets, dude.
Yeah. So that's all we have to say, I think, for now about Luck Be A Landlord. Again, it is $9.99. It's on Steam. It's on Humble. It's on itch.io. If you buy it on itch, you'll get a Steam key, and the developer will keep more of your money. So if you're going to buy this game, I would say give that a try. If you haven't bought on itch before, this would be a great first game to check out there, and you can still get your Steam key if you want. And I really recommend it. Again, it's from Trampoline Tales.
Yeah.
Do we have time for some What's Making Us Happy this week?
Yeah, I think so. And I also just want to say, I really think that if we as a society just got together and ate one billionaire, that would probably bring some major change. Like we just need to publicly eat one billionaire. And I think,
And then look at each and every other billionaire and say, you're next.
I think it would be implied. I don't even think we'd have to say you're next. I think if we just ate them on like live TV, it would probably, make things a little bit better. But anyway, what's making me happy?
Thanks, Nate.
I played a board game, actually twice in the last.
Oh man, mine's
month.
a board game too.
Nice. Oh, we haven't.
I'll go in the middle so we don't have back-to-back board games. Go ahead.
What if it's the same board game? So I played.
And they played it together.
Shane, I said I was going to do it, not you. No, it's called Scythe. Have either of you heard of this?
Dude, I have wanted to play Scythe for years. I've never actually gotten to.
Yeah, so I do normally Thursday nights are D&D nights, but the last couple months have been difficult scheduling, so it's become board game night with a smaller group, and we've played Scythe twice in the last month, which has been really fun. With a more complicated board game, that second game is always like the really good one. The first one you're figuring out the mechanics, and then the second one is where everyone kind of knows what they're doing, and it's more fun. But Scythe is an interesting game. It takes place in a sort of fictionalized Eurasia landscape, right around like post World War One, pre-World War II sort of universe, all fictionalized, where it is a world that is sort of at war for the various resources, and also there are giant mechs, which is always cool. And it's a modern board game, so it has great tokens and figurines, and everybody who plays gets multiple little fully cast plastic mech units that they get to put on the board. And it's an interesting balance between like a worker placement game and a like a territory control game that kind of hard to make sound particularly interesting in a podcast. But if you enjoy more complex board games that really make you think about not just the worker placement element, but like predicting what your other teammates are going to do, or the other players in the game are going to do, even if you have very little direct interaction. It's a lot of fun. It's a complicated game, and I highly recommend it. It's called Scythe.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah.
I have not played any board games this week, but I did get a cool new toy that I wanted to recommend.
Oh, I love cool new toys.
Yes, and I'm not sure whether this will be relevant to anyone else on this podcast, nor listener, whether this will be relevant to you, but I thought I would share it.
Finally got that Red Ryder BB gun.
Finally. Yeah, no, what I got, and I'm going to hold it up, but this won't make good radio, so I'll describe it. Can either of you guys tell what this is, just by looking at it?
That is a Doctor Who prop.
It is not. This is a Pinecil. The Pinecil, I've wanted to get one of these for a long time, and I never got around to it, but I was doing some soldering recently, and I decided it would finally be a good opportunity for me to pick up the Pinecil. The Pinecil.
Pinecil? The
Yes,
Pinecil.
I keep saying it because it's a weird word. It's like pine, but pencil. Like pine. It's from a company called Pine. They make like a bunch of open source hardware products, including like a Pinebook laptop. But one of their neatest little things is they also make this thing called the Pinecil, which is a mini portable soldering iron that runs off of USB-C. You can also run it off of a DC power supply, but it's the coolest soldering iron I've ever owned. And I've owned a few soldering irons. And so basically I would say that this is the soldering iron to get if you are a hobbyist solderer and not doing it professionally, no matter who you are. They're very inexpensive. They cost about $25 directly from Pinecil, or you can buy them on Amazon for a little bit of a premium. If you don't want to wait, because they do a kind of a rolling restocking kind of thing through their own website. It's to give you an idea of the look of it. Like imagine something that's about the size and weight of like literally a pencil, or maybe like if you have something like an Apple Pencil with an iPad, it sort of feels kind of like that. It's a little thicker. It has a tiny little OLED screen on it. And rather than, unlike most soldering irons I've owned, it's not like a little like soldering iron connected by a large wire to kind of a big bulky power supply thing where all the controls are. You know, my first soldering iron was not temperature controlled. You plugged it in. It was just like a dumb. You plug it into the wire and it heated up to a fixed temperature. You hoped, and it would take a long time to get up to that temperature. Later, I spent a bunch of money on a nice soldering iron that was much more expensive than the Pinecil and was temperature controlled. You could set exactly what temperature you want. That makes a huge difference when you're doing fine soldering. Had replaceable tips. Rather than just being something you throw away after the tips get bad. And that I was pretty happy with that soldering iron. But the Pinecil is even better and even cheaper than my nice soldering iron. It's small, it's lightweight. It doesn't have a giant bulky box that does the temperature control and power supply. It uses any USB-C PD power supply. You just plug in a USB-C cable to it and it will run. So that means you literally, if I wanted to go solder outside, I could plug this into a USB-C battery pack and do that if I wanted, or anywhere. It's very easy. And all the smarts, it's got a little CPU inside the soldering iron. So you can use little buttons on the soldering iron itself to control the temperature. It has an accelerometer in it and can tell what position it's in. So it'll do things like go to sleep automatically for safety if you set it down. It's got like it's like
it sounds really cool. I don't think I need to hear any more about its power management capabilities.
Fine.
Okay. It does sound super awesome.
I knew this was gonna be boring for everybody but me.
So no, it's cool though. I
played HeroQuest.
Well, this is my endorsement for the Pinecil. It's really cheap. It's an amazing soldering iron, and there's a bunch of other cool stuff that you can read about on their website.
Tell me one cool thing you've soldered.
So I bought this to I'm working on a Power Mac, or sorry, not Power Mac, a Macintosh LC2 that I'm trying to get repaired.
Oh, sweet.
So I'm so glad you apologize too.
Yeah. So I bought a junkyard special like broken Macintosh LC2 that I've been trying to get up and working again. And so far I've replaced all of its capacitors on the main board. That hasn't 100% fixed the issue. I replaced its clock crystal, because I think that the issue I was having might be related to an aging clock crystal that improved it, but hasn't 100% solved it. My next project is to recap its power supply, and then we'll see. So if that doesn't work, then I've just wasted a bunch of time and capacitors. But we're getting there. I'm trying to get a working Mac for like run some 90s software.
Sweet. I remember that era of Macs, the little. They were the pizza boxes that were the right size to support your large CRT display that you would chunk down on top of it, all in beautiful beige.
I love it. Mm-hmm. So that's my recommendation. If you ever need a soldering iron, get a Pinecil. If you need it professionally, there's better stuff, but this is the best for a hobbyist that I've ever seen. It's fantastic.
If you need a soldering iron professionally, and you're listening to this podcast just hoping that Raygan will drop a legitimate soldering iron recommendation that will help you make your working life decisions, then you are disappointed, my friend. But if you're not that person, get the Pinecil.
Shane, what's making you happy this week?
Giving you shit about your Pinecil.
Fuck off. Excuse me.
No, but the thing that's really making me happy this week is that last Thursday, I got a chance to bust out for the first time in many years HeroQuest, which is back.
Hell yeah.
And first off, this was a really wonderful birthday gift from Raygan. It takes a while to get the right number of people together to play HeroQuest. Although actually having really gone through it, I think HeroQuest would work quite well for just 2 players, but it's really 2 to 5. For those of you who may never have seen this, it back in the like late 80s, I believe like 89 or early 90s, Milton Bradley and Games Workshop, so that's the board game people and the people that brought you Warhammer, got together to make a board game that was basically D&D in a box, and it was very simplified Dungeons and Dragons in a little little dungeon that you would build piece by piece out of really cool little dungeon tiles and elements. And this game had a very rare thing at the time, a complete collection of absolutely awesome minis.
This is what I remember most about the game, because we had it when we were kids, and the miniatures, like, we played the game a handful of times, but I must have looked at those miniatures a zillion times. They were incredible.
And it had also a lot of really wonderful elements to it, like not just the miniatures, but the furniture. A lot of that in the original was made out of cardboard and stuff, but really cleverly made. It held up to some pretty intensive play. It would be like little shelves full of potions and books and desks and a coffin that you could put the vampire inside of and things like that. And the new one,
full like build a dungeon set, and like even after people probably quit playing the the HeroQuest game, if you were a D&D player, it was still like a pretty viable set of stuff to use.
Sure. It was. And the minis were great. Miniatures from that era have a really particular charm because the sculpt that they would use for miniatures back then, especially on something like this that was injection molded plastic, was a lot lower in detail than what you see on miniatures today. So if you get a miniature today, the level of the resolution, so to speak, is incredible. But then everything had to be suggested. It was really, really rough sculpted. And it just led to these little dudes like the skeletons, with a real mean look, holding a scythe above their head. And these like chunky little dudes were so fun to play with. But the new game, I have to say, a lot of fun. Essentially, it's the same game. They haven't made a lot of changes, except there's new minis and things like that. But it seems like, to me, a perfect
Does it still
replication.
have the like really simple like D6 combat where it's like...
It does. That's exactly the same. And I played it with a full group, except in the way the game is balanced, there are 4 characters that you play with. There's a wizard, an elf, a dwarf, and a barbarian. And the game's kind of balanced for all 4. So however many players you have, you kind of divide up the characters that you are going to control. And then one player will play as Zardoz, the wizard, who's the one that controls all the bad guys. This is kind of this thing's version of the Dungeon Master.
Nice.
It's very much a tactical game. Like the players move from room to room, revealing the rooms. The coolest part of the game is the way that it's it uses this kind of flat game board, but every time you go into a hallway or a room, you can see through kind of line of sight where all the doors and things like that are. And there are little miniature doors that are fantastic. You just put them right where they are. And there's miniatures to represent a closed or an open door. And the gameplay mostly is kicking down doors, killing all the monsters in the room, and then searching the room for loot. And that's a really satisfying little loop.
Yeah, what more could you want than that?
Especially in 1989, man.
Yeah. The thing about this as a game is that, I mean, the original was kind of made for kids. I remember we played it quite a few times, not as often as I played with the little minis and stuff. But if the players work together, they can usually win because a lot with the way the combat works out, it's a matter of just like get your opponents to one of those many doors as a choke point and just kind of, get in more attacks than they get. And eventually you'll do all right. But and you'll level up and get stronger as you go. I have to say, I played this with some of my good friends, people I've played D&D with, people who I know how to play D&D. And I tried to talk someone else into being Zardoz, but I was Zardoz. And
of course,
it was a total party kill, and I may never get to play this game again.
Oh no!
They ended up kind of running around in a circle and like stretched out in this long hallway, and I managed to get monsters in between all of them, so I was getting like more hits on them than they were on the monsters, and that's kind of what it takes to lose in HeroQuest. Get split up, get the party in different spots, And then the gargoyle comes out and he just fucking wrecks shop. So there you go. But my review is it's great. It's a fun time. I need more friends that I can trick into playing it with me. I haven't stomped at HeroQuest.
Well, hopefully, if they all hate HeroQuest, you can just bring the gargoyle out at an opportune moment in a D&D campaign, and they'll all recognize him and go, "Oh no, that guy!"
I think if one player played all of the heroes, it would be a little bit on the complicated side, but not too bad, and it would play pretty well as like a 1v1 with one person doing Zardoz and the other doing all four of the heroes.
Well, I'm glad it got some play. To be honest, I bought that for you mostly out of nostalgia because I thought it would be fun to look at the minis.
It is.
And but yeah, I'm glad it got at least some play. I was thinking like, well, maybe he'll never play this, but maybe he'll use the minis in D&D or something. So
and I will. If that's what you're thinking for this, it's great for that. It is a bunch of really basic monsters and furniture and really useful stuff like door markers in a box, and it's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this week's episode of The Short Game. Thank you for joining us. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net or shortgame.omg.lol. And all of our contact options are on the omg.lol page, so that's a good place to find us. But we're on Twitter at _shortgame, and we're on Mastodon at shortgame at zork.social. And let's see. We are also on Patreon. This show is supported by you, the listeners, on Patreon. Thank you for your support. And if you'd like to join the hordes of listeners supporting us on Patreon, paying for our hosting and servers and whatnot, you can join them by going to patreon.com/theshortgame. And if you support us at even $1 a month, which is nothing, then you'll get instant access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the show, we talk about the games that we're playing. It's a good place to go if you want to talk us into playing your favorite game. So go do that. And let's see, you can find me on Mastodon. I'm Raygan, Raygan, at bird.rodeo. And Nate, where can people find you?
Guillotining Billionaires.
Yes.
On Twitter at NateSTL. And on Mastodon now, though I'm still getting used to it. What is it? Nate at bird.rodeo.
And Shane, where can people find you?
You can find me on Mastodon. I'm at 8bitshane at mstdn.social, which is such a mouthful.
Hey, if you want to move to the bird.rodeo domain, Laura and Nate are on there now. When we first got you set up, Shane, I was on a lower tier plan on the Mastodon host that I was on, and I was concerned that the wheels would fall off, but now I'm pretty sure it's solid. So if you ever want to move over, we could all be on bird.rodeo for the convenience of the listeners. Let's see. And that's it. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next week on The Short Game.